All right, we're live. Welcome to the first lug of what is it, September? It is September, right? Okay, so the main topic for today is going to be: is Linux too much like Windows? Now, you may be thinking, haven't you guys already done this topic? We did, but we did it on the podcast. And the reason why I put it down here because I wanted to broaden this out into a community discussion, more about how reliant some distros have become on the Windows paradigm, and also to ask the question, does it really matter all that much? So that's where we're going to go this time. Usually on the lug, we'll start off with the main topic, then we'll meander through whatever the hell we want to talk about, which we'll do today. So let's go ahead and get started. As always, I'd like to remind you, like RBM did, raise your hand when you want to speak. So RBM, you can take us first.
I want to first start with a question. What do we mean by like Windows? Are we talking about like some certain parts of it, or like what part of the concept of Windows are we trying to, reason about?
Well, it could be pretty much anything, but really, I think when people say that, what they mean is, the Windows like paradigm. You got the menu at the left hand side, clock on the right hand side, bar at the bottom, windowed
So
experience
mostly
like that,
like UI,
UI
UX
stuff.
stuff,
But
just like how you interact with the system, not necessarily how you like manage or administrate things
well,
or
the thing is, like, do you know of a Linux distro that does a good job of mimicking Windows as like a settings panel or whatever? Most of them avoid that as much as possible. Now there's like the Ubuntu or whatever, which did it, but most real
yeah.
distros, didn't don't
I don't
do
know.
that. They
I
don't they
think
don't
I
go
think
that
KDE
deep.
has already kind of done the Windows thing to the maximum extreme, and we don't really have. It's like KDE kind of is like the Windows like user experience paradigm, but then taken to the furthest extent to allow everything to be like tinkerable in the UI and not actually restrict anything away the way that Microsoft does. They don't instead of hiding things, they continue to expose options and settings, which is kind of like the whole Windows thing is that you can do it all from the GUI, sort of. And KDE kind of already supplies that, like it fulfills that goal. Uh, and then I think XFCE already kind of does a little bit of it too. So
No, it depends
I'm
on
not
what
sure.
version.
I'm not sure. I guess I just don't understand where the question really comes from. Where we're just already being like Windows all the time in
Well, no,
most
that's really
respects.
the question: is Linux too much like Windows? Like, do desktop environments put too much weight on providing familiarity with the Windows concept in certain cases? Like you just mentioned KDE. I don't XFCE depends on what, if you're using that thing vanilla, it doesn't look anything like Windows. Um, the like Cinnamon though is the one that I go back to, is that looks like Windows the most. Bernie Phoenix, you're next.
Um, my take on it is pretty much that yes, we have moved a lot in the direction of what like the Windows thing is. And I think that KDE plays a big role in it. But I think that um we are on this point where we shouldn't go further into like this Windows paradigm, because if we go further, people will just mistake us more for like just, yeah, it's just Windows, but with another name. And one thing that I hope will never change, and I think this will never change, but managing drives, because and I think that's something that some desktops might try. Windows handles drives very differently with like letters and stuff like that, and I think that's kind of difficult thing for Windows users to get, that we are not like having it separately with like um A B C D E F G and whatever, but like in the same file system structure based out of root, and then you have like mount or home, and then you mount some drives wherever you like. And I hope this stays, because otherwise I will get the feeling to just use like Windows,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. Steve, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Yeah. I'm still getting used to Hyperland. Come on.
You're gonna blame Hyperlamp for all of your problems, man.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna blame it. That's for sure. I'm gonna go yelling at Backstreet too. Um, but yeah, no, Linux should not be like Windows. I refute the notion of Linux mimicking Windows. Why? Why should we make it mimic Windows? It's its own separate thing. It shouldn't mimic anything. It's like Mac OS and Windows. Should we make Mac OS mimic Windows just because the people don't who are coming from Windows do not feel so comfortable with Mac OS? If you don't like Mac OS because it's not mimicking Windows, don't freaking use it. You don't like Linux because it's not mimicking its features. It's not mimicking Windows's features. Don't use it. Don't just ask the developers, hey, Linux developers, please, we beg you, we are on our knees, we beg you, make Linux look and feel like Windows, because we don't want to move and change our habits. You don't want to change your habits? Stick to freaking Windows. Why should Linux mimic something so broken and so insecure and so ugly like Windows, just because we don't want to hurt your feelings, baby? No, I completely refute the idea of Linux mimicking Windows. Let Linux do its separate thing, the way it's doing it. On the other hand, I would love for Linux to start doing things better. Yes, we all wish the thing we use was better, but we shouldn't utter these words. I wish Linux was like Windows. Windows is the best. I tell those people, go touch some grass, please. Yeah, that's my 2 cents, and do with it what you wish.
Uh, that was a very angry rant, Steve. Riggs, go ahead.
Like, there's some that are, yeah, but like the main thing for me with Linux is just you've got options. It's like if there is someone who's comfortable on something that looks like Windows, they've got Cinnamon. If not, they've got like whatever else they want to use. Like when I first switched, I went with Ubuntu over Mint purely because I wanted something that looked different. Eventually grew and moved on to Arch, but like the point is that you can have options. You can have some that like mimic that kind of style because maybe you don't like how Windows does things, but you love the UI. Well, then use a DE that looks like that. But like, as long as there's still like a variety and like different kinds of things available for people who want different kinds of things, I don't think it really matters overall if like a few of them are super close to Windows. And I do think that we have taken one of the good things from. I've not used SUSE, but my understanding is that YAST is basically the control panel. So like they've took like one of the good things that Windows did and implemented it. But like, to me, the whole thing's just about choice. Like there's enough options that it doesn't really matter because if you don't like one thing, just use something else.
I mean, yeah, I mean, basically, we just end the conversation there, right? So just to go back to your YAST comment, the YAST existed before Windows Control Center did. So, but I will say that I wouldn't give I talked about this on the podcast the other night. I would not give a new user access to YAST. I mean, it would just explode their computer because it gives them option to do way too many things that they don't know about. Fraggle, go ahead.
I mean, the poll was like, does Linux need to be more like Windows? And in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. I mean, Matt, you can attest to your monitor issues. If you could configure your monitors as easily on Linux as you can on Windows, it would be a beautiful thing, right? But you can't. It has to be some sort of manual type of configuration. As far as like UI goes and everything like that, I mean, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Every system, Mac OS or iOS type of thing, or well, Mac OS, some sort of like a launcher or a panel type of thing. menu and everything like that, or like Windows style, which has, taskbar, start menu, everything like that. Like you can get DEs and WMs and all those little things in Linux to make it look like Windows or Mac OS or whatever. But it's just ease of configuration or ease of access, especially for new users and stuff like that. I think Linux could come a long way with something like that, especially with installing software and everything like that, because every single distribution does it slightly differently. And there's no real, like, just download this, double click it, click next, okay, it's done. It that just doesn't really exist in the Linux realm, and I think that we could benefit from that, just for drawing in and increasing the user base, and then they can increase their skills as they kind of navigate along if they want to. But yeah, that's my input on that.
Shady? We can't hear you. Linux audio problems. Every lug. We'll come back to you, Shady. Burning Phoenix, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Do you mean me?
Yeah, you're next. Shady, we can hear Shady. Go ahead.
My internet got wrecked for like a second, so I didn't hear you. When you said that you wouldn't let a new user access Yast because of all the options, something that came to my mind is when I first used Zero Linux. I installed Emacs, Doom Emacs, because my brain didn't know like the meaning of it, and thought that I would install like some kind of fork of the Doom game. And I mean, I think that this is kind of the perspective that a lot of new users come in from, and they don't know like the words and what like things mean necessarily, uh, especially if it's like program that's only really known in like the Linux space, and they come from Windows and use all their proprietary crap. And yeah, so restricting users from accessing some stuff is good. And I think hot take, immutable distros help with that.
Yeah, the argument for immutable distros would be interesting one for us to have maybe later, because that doesn't claim to be more like Windows. That claims to be more like a mobile operating system where everything is containerized, can be updated in pieces, it's updated in the background. You don't mess with any of the administration of the thing, and you just carry on and use the machine like you would a phone. Like you don't really deal with any of the stuff that goes on in the background. Like most people don't ever go to the settings of their phone; they just use their phone. Shady, did you get your sound fixed? Nope.
This was me last time.
Yeah. We'll come back to you, Shady. Dark Zero. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning Zero Linux, Burning. But yeah, that's another. You brought a interesting subject. The part where we have to block things for users. That's what I did recently with the Cosmic install script. I put a hard stop in case it detects unsupported hardware, and it detects that it's being run on something other than Arch. We need sometimes to put those kind of stops, because a lot of users come into Linux expecting it to behave like Windows. If we don't put hard limitations to them, to tell them and to shake their noggin, as you Americans say, telling them, hey, you're not on Windows, you're on something completely and utterly different. So those things are should be put in place. But as to what should look like Windows in Linux, yeah, compatibility. This is a very important subject. Hardware compatibility. This is where it should mimic Windows. It should be compatible with a wider range of hardware without having to wait for developers to reverse engineer the drivers to work on Linux. Like I watched a video of I don't know what his the something owl uh, on YouTube where he talked about his experience on Linux. He was trying to get his Insta 360 camera to work, and guess what? Absolutely no one thought to reverse engineer the driver for it to work on Linux. So in the middle of his meeting, serious meeting, I'm not talking friends and whatever. He was in a serious work related meeting. All of a sudden, it decided to play the Earthquake game on him, and gave nausea to the participants. Uh, this is a very important area where Linux should mimic Windows. Without a wider hardware compatibility, Linux adoption will trickle. We're seeing it grow, but it's not going to grow very high. It's going to stay around the 6 or 7% for a very long time because those people who are migrating to Linux are quickly going to figure out that compatibility with their hardware is not there. So they're going to go back, trickling back to Windows, crawling back to Windows. So yeah, this is sorry, I was angry earlier, but I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, hardware compatibility is a very important
Well,
thing that Linux has to make.
DD in the chat says compatibility is not something that Windows intrinsically has. It's because it's so popular. That's true, but also, even if it wasn't popular, Windows does something that's really good. So if you plug something in, it will go hunting for a driver for it. Even if it doesn't exist, it will go hunting for it. It will try to, as much as it can, go out and find whatever software it needs, whether it's built into the operating system or elsewhere, to get it to work. And if it can't find it, it will tell you. And then you can go find it yourself, right? Linux doesn't do that. If you plug in a new, like I just got an NVIDIA graphics card for this machine. I didn't leave it in there for very long, but I plugged it in. And yes, it worked, but it worked on the open source drivers, and it didn't recognize that it was there. It didn't tell me that it had new hardware or anything. It didn't give me the option. Like, if in the ideal situation, it would recognize, hey, you have a new graphics card in there. Would you like us to go find, the proprietary drivers or whatever? Same thing if you plug in a printer or whatever. It should go out and find the drivers, even if it's just in a file somewhere in the root directory. It should go find the things that it needs in order for it to make it work. But it doesn't always do that in most situations, I don't think. So it's one that's definitely one of those areas where Windows kind of does it better, but also some of it is because of the popularity of it. Shady, did you get your audio working?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Woo!
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna go back to the topic we were talking about on how or if Linux should look like Windows. I was watching a video on like the most failed games on Steam. And one of the things they kept saying was the reason why it was disliked so much, it was because it had high expectations to look like something. So if you apply this to Linux, if you install Linux and it all looks like Windows, you're going to expect it to work like Windows as well. So then you'll get frustrated when it doesn't work like that. But when I was trying Mac OS for the first time, everything was so different. I was just trying to figure things out. I didn't really try to think that, files should work the same thing because it just looks so different. And I think as long as some things are familiar, so you're not completely going in blind, but not too familiar where you'll get mad because, it looks the same, but it doesn't work the same.
That's a very good point. Riggs, go ahead.
I'm gonna have somewhat of a potentially controversial one here. This is way too elitist of an idea for someone who's only used Linux for 2 years. But this whole idea of like locking like users out of changing certain things and like making things easy to use, like the whole point is that you can tinker with your own system. I don't see the point in, like, yeah, you're making things like easier to use, but you're making things easier to use for people who are then going to come in, and if they're going to stick with this, they're probably going to want to start tinkering with things eventually. So, like, why are we locking out them options? And I'm kind of stumbling over my words there, but like, I think that, like, yeah, it makes sense if you're looking at it as like we're making things simple for new users, but like, I feel like Linux is the kind of thing where new users are going to eventually become users who want to mess with things, because to me that's the whole point, is that this is your system, you can do whatever you want with it. And like having things locked down like that, I just do not see the benefit of, not for Linux anyway.
Well, I think you might have been the one to say it earlier. If you don't want to use a system that has things that are locked down, just go use something different. Go use Venom. Fraggle will help you on Venom. You're not gonna get locked down on Venom. Go use Gentoo. Go use OpenSUSE or whatever. Those aren't gonna be ever locked down. But if you're, I think that this is where the immutable argument is quite different, because not everything is going to go immutable. Like Debian may never go immutable. Like it's probably not ever going. It's going to be Debian for what it is. And if it does, it'll be many, many years down the road. There are always going to be some distros that are for us nerds who want to go into the Etsy folder and mess around and have a good time, right? But I think that there is a market for a distro that is more a little bit, Apple-like, in that it's more locked down, less user dependent on maintenance and stuff like that. And that's not even that's not a Windows thing. That's more of an Apple thing, right? But Windows has tried to emulate that over the course of the last few years, where they've kind of locked things down even more. Things are more containerized as they try to get through stuff. Now, they have a big problem because they have all that legacy shit that they have in the background. That's, like Windows 3.1 stuff is still in the background trying to work and stuff. So they haven't been able to be as complete about it as Apple has. So I think both things can exist in the same world. Steve, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm struggling to go from one monitor to the other. But to go back to what Riggs just said, that's why Zero Linux, the likes of Zero Linux exist. We're not locking. For example, I know for myself, I'm not locking anyone into anything. I just make things easier. But the reason I do it via the toolkit is because I want users to learn. They can read the verbose output. Everything is verbose. That way, should they choose and want to tinker with their system, next time they want to install from scratch, they at least, for those who paid attention to the terminal, and I know they're very few and far between, but for those who paid attention to the terminal output, they would be learning along the way. So that's why I don't do much. The only thing I do on Zero Linux is just apply a decent rice to KDE. It's just a rice. And why do people love Zero Linux? Is because of the rice. That's the selling point of Zero Linux. Nothing more, nothing less. It's, hey, your distro looks good, I'm gonna donate and get it. And I appreciate the people who supported me so far, but that's the selling point of Zero Linux. As to the immutable systems, Matt, the immutable systems, they're too much like Mac OS, kind of like, not immutable, the atomic distros as they're called now. They lock down a few things, not everything. That you can still tinker with your system to a certain degree, and if you break it, you can roll back to a previous generation. That's a lot of good things that it brings to the table. But I used Universal Blue, various versions of it, but I settled on Aurora because KDE. But I felt so locked out. I couldn't I didn't have the freedom that I had on Arch Linux. But then again, those distros, they have their own target audience. They're not targeted at us tinkerers, us admins, system admins, as we call ourselves, tend to call ourselves sometimes, but we're not system admins, we're just tinkerers. So for us tinkerers, those are not the distros. We can build them, we have the flexibility of building them, but tinkering with them after installing them on our system is not a doable thing, not unless you want to keep generating, like someone posted on your Discord, I don't know, a month ago or something, where he had 600 different generations because he tinkers too much and he layers too much. Atomic distros, they got their target audience, but they're not Linux the way we perceive Linux to be: freedom, tinkering, open, and whatever. It's maintained by the developers. They have ultimate control, not you, the end user, unless you are a developer and you know how to tinker. But if you're just a regular user, they're good because they stay out of your way. No maintenance, no nothing. All the maintenance stuff is on the developers' shoulders. You just receive the end product.
Mm.
And the one thing I love about them, that's the last thing I'm going to say. One thing I love about the Atomic distros is the fact that you have a peace of mind. You relax, you install, you update. You know that it's been tested by a few individuals before you receive the update. So relax. It's not like rolling distros like Arch.
Yeah. Burning Phoenix, go ahead.
About the same point from Rix, if I remember correctly. The point is not that we tinkerers don't benefit much from atomic distros. The point is that most users, believe it or not, are people who don't want to tinker, who want just a stable system that they can rely on, as Zero already said. And I think that's kind of the point why atomic distros see a rise in popularity, is because more people join the Linux gang, and those people who come from Windows most likely will get suggested to Enoid, Silverblue, anything in that like realm of distros. And maybe a short plug as well. If you use Fedora, for example, you can download my tool and set it up easily, because my perception is that a lot of people just, even if they install normal distro, just kind of want the easy route. And so there are finished scripts for gaming, for office work, for streaming and stuff like that. So just one-click solution. I think that's what a lot of people seek, and they see it mostly in those atomic distributions.
Raggle, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of looping back and expanding upon what Burning just said, with like certain areas being locked down and stuff like that. Like Windows isn't necessarily locked down, but it is like that kind of one-click experience, right? Even when you're installing something and you have to run it as administrator, you don't have to type in a password every single time. It's just, are you sure you want to do this? And you just say yes, and it just happens. And as far as I know, I don't think I've ever seen a Linux distribution that operates in that way, right? UI design aside, everything like that. Just the level of entry to getting into Linux. And I mean, if somebody's coming over from Windows, there's just so many options. It can be overwhelming, right? I mean, even me, like I started with Linux like early to mid 90s, and it wasn't even until like early 2000s, like 10 years later, before I really started to be an administrator of my system as opposed to a user of my system. And I had to actually meet another Linux user that was more experienced than me to help guide me through that as well. I mean, for people transitioning from Windows and stuff like that, sure, UI can be one thing, but I mean, muddling through administrative type of things, which eventually you have to do with Linux. There's no two ways about it. Eventually, you are going to have to cross that bridge. Yeah, I mean, maybe not for some people. They might just browser and Facebook and YouTube and stuff like that, and Linux is just lighter on their system. But for most, they have to transition to using root type commands for their system. And with Windows, like, you never really have to do that. It's just, it works. It's there. And yeah, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's a really good point on the password thing, because when people see a password, they automatically think that they're doing something weird, and they have to that they're doing something official, that it's going to make a big impact, even if it's just installing their thing. Now, in some ways, that's a good thing because it gets them thinking. This could cause harm if it goes wrong, and you enter a password, that something actionable is going on. But on the other hand, because it's that's kind of a two-faced thing, because you have certain people who have grown up with Windows and use that thing, and every once in a while they'll see the administrator thing that pops up. Are you sure you're wanting to do this? And it's just a button. And while yes, that's not as it's not like a grave decision as it would be on Linux. It also removes some of the fear people would have. Like if you have to go into your software center and enter a password in order to install something, it doesn't feel like an experience that you're going to want to have all the time, because it provides that it's just like a sense of gravity when you do it, right? Now, one of the things that's kind of happened over the course of the last couple of years is we've seen more and more containerized package formats, right? So when you install a Flatpak, at least on most distros, you don't have to enter a password. If you install a Snap, you don't have to enter a password, at least from a GUI. I don't know if you do it in the terminal or what. It's one of the shocking things on OpenSUSE, because they set up Flatpak to ask for a password, and that was kind of shocking to me because I hadn't had that experience for a while. So I think as we transition more into containerized stuff, that need for entering a password goes down at least a little bit. Now, once you jump into the terminal, sudo rules the day again, right? Des, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself. All right, we'll come back. Riggs, go ahead.
With the immutable stuff, or atomic, or whatever they're called nowadays, I don't remember what was first, but like, I know it's never going to be for me, but looking at it from like a new user idea as well, like, yeah, it's easier to work with, but it's causing more fragmentation of the documentation. Like, you remember back in the LTT Linux challenge days when Linus got confused that apps wasn't on Manjaro? Like, that's already a problem if like you look up how to do something in Linux and like your answer depends what you're running. But if if immutables keep growing, it's then going to be like half of the stuff that you find is going to be, oh, go and change this Etsy file, and the other half you just can't do that. And like, if you're going in completely new and you don't know what an immutable is, you've just been told to use this distro. Like, a good half of like the stuff that you find when you're searching how to do something just isn't going to work. You're just not going to be able to do it.
How much stuff would you actually have to search for that requires you to mess around in the? I mean, of those people here, think back to when you first started using Linux. I mean, especially the newer people, right? How often do you really have to go into the root directory to start messing with stuff? I mean, even now, I consider myself a power user. I very rarely go into the root directory to mess with stuff, and usually when I do, it's such advanced stuff like setting up an NFS share or mounting a drive or something like that. That's when I have to do it, right? And yeah, there are going to be certain situations where you do have to do that. You're right. But I think I think that one of the problems with this type of discussion, when we're all a bunch we're a big group of Linux nerds, right? And we all use Linux, and we have experience with Linux, and it's really hard for us to think about, random, somewhat technologically minded, but not as much as us user, who has gotten to the point of using Linux but isn't a power user. They're not a tinker. They maybe they got a Steam Deck and they found that Steam works really good on Linux now, right? And all their games working. They're like, okay, I can finally get rid of this Windows nonsense, and I just install Bluefin or Bazite or whatever, and they do that. They're gonna have the same experience on that, or at least they should, as they did on SteamOS. And part of the reason why immutables are good is for that type of user. Like Steve said earlier, I think it was Steve, that they have a target audience. It's never going to be the uber Linux nerd like us. That's not necessarily who they're targeted for. But I would even push back against that just a little bit, because I've been testing Bluefin on multiple computers over the course of the last few months, and it's going to be my next long-term review. And there's a certain amount of freedom about never having to update your system. Like, it just does it. Like, it doesn't even tell you it's doing it. It does it. Like, sometimes, like it the other day, Vivaldi updated, and I didn't even know it. It just opened up a tab, said your browser's been updated. And I'm like, what? Oh, cool. I know. I like on OpenSUSE every 4 days I have to go do sudo zipper and sudo zipper dup, and I have to do that on my own. And then I have to run the Flatpak upgrade on my own. And there is a certain freedom for having all of that stuff just managed for me. And I'm not a new user. Steve, or hold on a second, Steve. Des, did you get your audio fixed?
Yes, it's working right now. It should be.
Okay, go ahead.
I think I think Linux should mimic Windows more on GPOs, so that we had a concept like GPOs, but on user interface, I think there should be more options to less mimic it.
Okay. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to what I think Shady said. It's just that Windows is, yes, a quick next, and whatever. It's very easy to use. So can Linux be. Linux can be as easy or as hard as the maintainers make it to be. It can be, yes. This is an area that Linux can mimic Windows to a certain degree, but the easier we make Linux, the less people will learn it. One of the reasons I disliked Windows was the fact that we could fix our own issues ourselves. We had to wait for Microsoft to one day after 10 years after the issue appears to fix it. Whereas with Linux, because of its open nature, we can just Google and find the fix and apply it, because hey, everything is there. Everything is easy to mess around with. So I don't know how much we can make Linux mimic Windows, but we have to. There are limitations. I would rather put in limitations, like in Zero Linux, for example. I give them the toolkit. I don't make it so easy. Like they want their drivers. I don't do like CachyOS or any other distro out there. Hey, the drivers are included on the ISO. You don't need to do anything. At the end of the day, when something breaks related to the driver, hey, I know nothing because I didn't learn nothing because I didn't need to do anything. Everybody, they did it for me, so I'm going to rely 1,000,000% on them, not me. I'm not going to learn anything. I'm just going to continue to be the ignorant Linux user that came to Linux, and I'm going to rely on them. Whereas when I give them in my toolkit the ability to install their drivers with a verbose output, they look at it. Hey, oh, so this is what it does. It installs these packages, and then after installing these packages, it does the mkinit cpio stuff, and then it creates a file in that location, and it regenerates the the init ramfs. Okay, so next time I want to install my drivers, this is how I'm going to do it. With Windows, because they are so not transparent, if an issue happens, hey, What happened? What happened? I don't know. I'm gonna ask for help. Are they gonna answer? Nah. Maybe when you're 60 or 70, maybe then will they fix it for you.
Steve, I think that's. I mean, it's a very. I don't want to call it an elitist view, but I mean, a lot of people don't want to learn about their operating system, and that's okay. I don't think.
I agree. I agree. I'm not saying. I'm not talking about those kind of people. I'm talking about the people who want to learn, who come into Linux wanting to learn. Sorry, I needed to clarify. The people who are coming to Linux expecting to learn something, they're gonna leave Linux the same way they entered Linux, not knowing anything. But for the people who don't want to do such things, like you said, Matt, so eloquently modified for me, those people, yes, I would highly recommend the Atomic distros for them. Those people, those types of distros are amazing for them. I use them. They're amazing distros, and there's almost nothing bad I can say about them. Absolutely not. Coming from the new user perspective who doesn't want to do anything except use their computer, amazing. But for people who more advanced who want to learn because they're curious, doing everything for them is not the solution. That's what I was saying.
Riggs, go ahead.
Going back a bit, I can't remember who, but somebody mentioned the idea of like if you're doing something on Windows and it's just like a pop-up that's just confirmed rather than a password, and the password being like more scary as if you're doing something serious. Is that not a good thing? Because if you don't know what you're doing, like with Windows and the confirm boxes, it's so easy to just like not even look at what you're doing and just spam click. And like, yeah, it's harder to break stuff because you don't have as much freedom to like mess around with things on Windows. But I think that if you're going to do something that is a serious change, you should have something scary that's like, hey, if you don't know what you're doing, this is a serious thing. I don't think just spamming confirm is like a fix to that, because like, I mean, passwords has the same, like when you've been using Linux for a while, passwords gets the same idea of like it comes up and you just like brain dead enter it. So like I don't think there's really a fix for it in general. But like if you don't know what you're doing, you should read what it's happening and like this is a serious change. Are you sure you want to do this? Otherwise, I mean, I mentioned the LTT thing earlier. Otherwise, you'd delete your DE by accident. Like, I think there should be something that's like, this is something serious that you're doing. Don't just like blindly spam through it.
Well, I mean, also, I mean, you could argue that administrator thing on Windows leads to a lot more viruses because, viruses would
absolutely
ask for that, right? And then people
absolutely
just don't realize that they're not actually the ones downloading something. Drew, go ahead.
I generally, when I come to these lugs, I kind of listen for a while and make some notes and so on. That way I can kind of like unload all at one time. The question of whether Linux needs to be more like Windows is incredibly nuanced, and should be broken down into a bunch of different topics or subtopics. From a familiarity perspective, many users want to see something that looks familiar to them. So I think from my perspective, should Linux change? No, but maybe individual distros should tailor their that familiarity into their distro. So I take it out of Linux and put it in the hands of the distro maintainers for people who are looking to transition to something that is familiar to them. As far as software compatibility is concerned, Windows does have a vast ecosystem for commercial software, and we've talked about this ad nauseum with regard to like Adobe products or some of the we talked about it on the podcast this past week. If you want compatibility for something like Outlook, which we do not have, and so those are things that maybe we should take a look more like in terms of more like Windows in that regard for compatibility only, though, because when it comes to customization and control, Linux and its flexibility and control, I don't want to give up. I don't want to give up. I don't want it to be more Windows like. I don't want it to be closed source. I want to have that level of customization. And in terms of environments and development, it can be really specialized. You know, we could have a very specialized use case, and Linux can lend itself to that specialized use case. Do I want Linux to be more like Windows in terms of security or stability? Hell no. You know, no. I mean, it's insane to think that we would give up anything that's going to change that aspect of Linux. And you know, and not to mention just being open source. You know, it's a complete philosophic change. You know, from going from something like Linux that emphasizes freedom and transparency and community collaboration. No, we're not giving up that either. You know, and not to mention the fact that because of those things, and we've talked about this again on the podcast, innovation is something that is one of our more precious things associated with these open source projects, and you know, exploring different approaches to specific technologies, and mimicking Windows in those areas is just going to stifle our creativity. So
Good points. Steve?
Okay. Thank you, Drew. You have spoken like a champ. That's exactly what I meant. You just summarized it in a non-angry man way. But yeah, if we make Linux mimic Windows way too much, and especially in the customization area, that's gonna stifle our creativity. That's 100% sure. I agree 100%, and it will stifle our learning growth. We won't be learning much. We will. The thing that not pisses me off. This is the wrong thing to say. The thing I find strange is that people come to Linux saying, "Hey, I want to learn," and then they go looking for the first distro that does everything for them. That doesn't leave room for them to learn, though they said they wanted to learn. So this I find strange. Zero Linux proves it. Like I gave them a script that does everything that does everything does everything while teaching them, because they're doing everything. They have to use Arch install. They still have to do manual work. I made them a script for free, and I told them use the script or support me and grab the ISO that installs everything without you learning anything. So they chose the distro over the script. That's a kind of a study for me that showed me how many people prefer easy to do things versus people who are willing to learn and willing to put in a little bit of elbow grease. So I'm still comparing. They're still early days, but the script has been used a total of 80 times, and Zero Linux, well, over 147 people got it. So that tells me sort of what people prefer. Now, there's the argument that goes, they just got it to support you, not to actually use it. I don't know about that, but still, people prefer easy to do things, and that's not wrong. Absolutely not. It just tells me a little bit about the people coming to Linux. They still want to install the OS and not have to worry about anything. And to that, I say, atomic distros. Enjoy them. Even your grandma is going to be able to update it.
Raggle, go ahead.
I think in some ways, I kind of have the opposite opinion of Steve. If there were eventually a distro that came out that really like mimicked Windows in a lot of ways, especially like ease of access, ease of use, and everything like that, it would bring more creativity into the Linux world. it's just that stepping stone, that entry level, right? Because right now, the way it is like maybe Linux Mint or Ubuntu has kind of like a low bar entry to get started with it and everything like that. But a lot of times, people will kind of jump ship because something doesn't quite work right and they don't understand how to make it work right. Where what they're familiar with is on Windows, everything just works. And I think that having an entry point or some version of Linux that is at that skill level can bring a lot more people in and not necessarily stifle creativity, but bring more people over that will potentially discover their own creativity and their own abilities and stuff like that, and help it like Linux as a whole grow, because we already have distros that are high skill level, difficult, LFS Gen 2, stuff like that, things that you absolutely would not recommend to a beginner unless unless you guys are like really close friends and you can kind of guide them through those things step by step. Then maybe somebody could have Gen 2 as their first Linux distro. But the amount of people that would happen to is pretty low, and I think that having something like a Linux distro that is very similar to Windows in a lot of ways would be beneficial to the Linux community as a whole.
That's a good point. RBM, go ahead.
So the main catch about Linux being more like Windows that I've been hearing is that people really are attached to their hardware compatibility, which is perfectly reasonable. I'm not trying to downplay that in any way. I think that makes a lot of sense. But we have kind of a chicken and egg problem on getting Linux to be more like Windows in terms of hardware support, because we need more Linux adoption on the desktop to convince the hardware producers and innovators to develop Linux drivers in the first place. Like, they just don't put any R&D or effort into supporting Linux from the jump, because there are no users to bother supporting. And when you do, you hear the horror stories that all of your bug reports come from Linux, and everybody who runs on Windows and Mac never has a problem and never reports anything to you. So you could just assume, obviously, that everything runs perfectly over there. And then these all compound the problem to give users like just an endless uncertainty about possible hardware support, which then means that they don't know if they can like estimate whether they'll even be able to be productive on their machine or do the things that they expect to be able to do. And like, the ecosystem is available for Linux drivers to be iterated on early in the hardware process, but it doesn't seem to happen because there's no users, and then the users don't want to be here. They don't want to jump ship because all of the uncertainty regarding hardware support. But Windows drivers come out of the gate all the time. Like you said, they just automatically download too. You just plug something in, and it tries to detect the device and pull down support for you automatically, which is just really feels magical. Maybe it's not that secure, I don't know, but we just we can't. There are limits to how much more like Windows we can be in that regard, and it seems to be like the main hanging point on pretty much every comment that was made. So I don't know where to go from there. It's just an observation, I guess.
Yeah, hardware support in Adobe, really. Shady, go ahead.
I wanted to add some stuff to what Zero said, which I don't think so. It's that people don't want to learn. It's just humans, in a way, like short-term rewards. and if you throw them into something very difficult, they'll struggle, they would get mad, they're gonna quit. So we normally seek out the easier things because we want those short-term wins, you know, like, oh, there's a small issue, you know, you fix it, you're happy, like, hey, I did something. And you know, it's not like you're going to come up to a new user, hey, I recommend trying Linux from scratch, you know. They're going to give up instantly. Same thing if you want to like do rock climbing. You're not going to go to Mount Everest, you know. You're going to go to, you know, like one of those rock climbing centers where it's safe. You know, there's someone always helping you out. You know, you're just trying to learn the lingo. When I started with Linux, you know, I was learning what LS or I guess CD, you know, what all those commands were, you know. I wanted those safety rails, you know, so I'm not going to go and like remove everything by accident. I was learning more naturally. I mean, I was coding, so I was trying to use the terminal more than the GUI. But I was working, so I wanted a distro that was stable as well, because it kind of gets so annoying that you're sitting down to work and then something breaks and then you spend half the day trying to find out what is wrong, which, yeah, it does help you learn and get better, but sometimes it just gets so annoying and in the way of your life.
Yeah, when things go wrong, it always throws a wrench in things. But I think that I think one of the things that has come up a few times in this conversation is that, you know, Steve says people don't want to learn and just use, you know, the easiest things. And you said people navigate towards the easiest solution thing. And that's true. But I think that there's a happy medium here, right? There's a gulf of difficulty between Linux from scratch and say like Bluefin, right? Like there's something in between those that exists that we can point people to who are interested in the learning things, but don't necessarily want to dive into building everything from scratch. You know, we don't have to go through and do everything. Like it doesn't have to be either or. So,
yeah, there are people who, you know, do prefer a challenge. For example, like you look at Dark Souls, it's like really difficult game, and people enjoy that game because they do enjoy the challenge. So it's, yeah, everyone's different. If you want to learn, I think you should kind of seek it out. You know, for example, like how to set up a server. You know, like I was free that day. You know, I was ready to tackle the issues, you know, all the problems I was going to have. I was ready to figure it out and learn and set it up, you know. So, yeah.
mhm. Patrick, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
First of all, let me preface everything by saying I'm new. I've been using Linux for maybe 3 months. And so, but I would like to agree with Drew on needing Outlook and maybe other Microsoft Office products on Linux. I don't know why Microsoft hasn't done that. It makes no sense. And then I would like to share a quick anecdote about my learning curve. I was on the SSH into my Linux machine behind me, editing a config file in Nano so that I could shut the laptop so it wouldn't disconnect. I lost my SSH connection, and when I went back to it, the file was gone. Don't know what happened there.
Yeah,
But that's all I wanted to share.
that happens still. The problem, just a pro tip for the future: Tmux is your friend on SSH. Install Tmux on the server or the remote client, and do all your stuff inside Tmux. If you lose the SSH connection, Tmux is still running the stuff in the background. So you just re-SSH in, and it will be there just like you never left.
I just found it funny that it deleted the file.
Yeah, it is weird
on the server.
Yeah, it shouldn't have done that, but Linux does funky things sometimes. It's weird.
But I'm loving Linux.
Well, welcome to the
like I
Linux
said,
community.
I'm only 3 months in, but we'll see.
Hey, you know what? Most people who try it out don't make it to 3-month mark.
Curious question: what distro did you choose?
Ubuntu 2404, a
Place to start.
desktop.
Good place to start. How are you liking GNOME?
Doesn't bother me, but then again, I haven't
Tried anything?
done any of the others. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, makes sense. All right. Riggs, go ahead.
First, just well done, Patrick. First 3 months is going to be tough learning something new. Compatibilities came up a lot. That is probably the biggest issue that we have. I don't look at it as like a being more like Windows thing. It's more of just a, hey, Linux has issues too. But like, I mean, look at like GPUs. Like 1 in 2 of the GPU manufacturers is like noticeably like a, oh, you're trying that on Linux kind of thing. Like we do need to work a lot more on compatibility. Also, I just want to point out, Drew made me laugh earlier. When you said like you stay quiet at first and like make a bunch of notes, because I've said a few things so far in this that like I've then backtracked in my head after I thought about it more, and then Drew just comes in like, I've got this innovative idea called thinking before I speak.
I can't take notes. And do this
Rarely happens, but yeah, sometimes.
It's the hat. The hat's got you going. Steve, go ahead. Don't forget to mute yourself. Maybe he didn't want to go. Okay, RBM, go ahead.
So there was kind of the second most discussed comment has been about the learning trap of Linux and how much a user will have to learn to transition from Windows to Linux. And I don't think we spoke much about the transition from Windows to Mac instead, which I guess I'll be thankful for. But it's a difficult topic to broach because Windows is also a learning experience for people. It's not always intuitive, and most users never actually learn how to do anything on Windows in the first place either. So, like, expecting people, even if they do intend to learn Linux in some capacity, to do so at any rate is really difficult to just put on them because they also never learned Windows. So of course they didn't figure anything out about Linux. And when they did try to learn something about Windows and try to transfer that knowledge, it was download the easiest installer for the thing that solves the problem on your behalf and use that. That's always the answer on Windows to everything. So of course, when somebody switches to Linux, the first thing they try, which often does fail, is find the easiest method of installing something that fills all those needs automatically for you. And we just don't have all the same toolkit available to provide that stuff to Windows, expats. But I don't know. It doesn't make people lazy or lame in any way to do that either. It's almost nobody knows how to use a computer. It's actually super uncommon for somebody to know practically anything about their PC and how to do anything on their own. Most people who use a computer today, I guess we have a couple of newer generations since computers have been around, but like the people that are learning how to use computers today are in a different spot. But people who came from Windows in the past, they didn't have any other experience. They didn't learn how to do anything, and they didn't when they needed management done on their system. Microsoft did it for them. It updated for them. It was inconvenient and blue screened them or kicked them off or knocked them off or rebooted at random times, but it just did it all for them. And when something broke hard enough, they don't fix it, they replace it. So it's really a lot to expect somebody to come to Linux and actually learn anything because they never learned how to use a computer in the first place.
It's almost like Linux is stuck in the 90s, and I say that being a Linux guy, the thing about the 90s, when the early 90s, was like when personal computers were first really becoming a thing, right? It was the Mac, and then later on Windows and stuff like that. And in order to use those computers, you had to basically learn how to do things, because everyone was learning how to do things, because everything was brand new, right? And if you and because there was no possible way if you got your first PC in like 93 or something like that, you couldn't have had previous experience, or at least very much previous experience, because PCs weren't prevalent amongst people, right? And the thing about, and I don't want to be the old guy who says kids these days, but kids these days, this is their computer, right? And this thing doesn't have a terminal, right? It doesn't have, like, if you want to go to install an application, you go to the App Store and you install it, and it's going to work. It's not going to break your thing, right? And that's just the way most people these days treat their computers. Everyone here, at least in some regard, treats Linux like a hobby, and that's one of the things I get commented on in videos all the time. Is like, you treat Linux like a hobby. There's no way you can do real work on Linux. Now, the thing is like, both of those things can kind of be true. Is that, yeah, Linux does sometimes become a hobby, but you can do real work on it. It just, Linux requires effort similar to like what computers used to back in the 90s, whereas a lot of operating systems have moved beyond that to the point where you don't have to know how to use a computer anymore, because it just does everything for you. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, it just...
Oh, go ahead.
It's so much, man. Anyway, I guess I'll cede the floor from there.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't know you're still unmuted. Drew, go ahead.
A couple things. One is, I guess, RBM, you're saying that there are bad users in the wild here, and bad Windows users and bad Linux users. I can't imagine that's true. No. Anyway, as far as Matt, when you're talking about like older PCs and stuff, it kind of led me to think about, like, when I first got into computers or personal computers, it was in the 1980s. And, I didn't have a hard drive. I had 2 floppy drives. And so you were required to learn DOS, back in the day. You had to learn, because there was nothing else. The disk operating system everything was command line. And then you went from there, which is where we're not. And so you're right. It seems like, because of where we are in technology, the phones are like 50 billion times more powerful than the computers back when people were actually, starting to learn computers. As far as, by the way, Patrick, welcome to the community. It's great to see someone coming to the community, trying to learn things and being a new user. Fantastic for you. My question, I guess, is, are we overstating hardware compatibility as being an issue? Because I think that you're talking about a lot of times, at least, we're talking about gamers or people that have incredibly specialized hardware for maybe things that they're trying to do in terms of, like, maybe, I don't know, media creation or something like that. But from a normal user, is that really something that is a negative? I don't know, because, like, I can buy a computer from Dell right now and it works on Linux just fine. You know what I'm saying? Or anything that's very common should work.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's my question, because honestly, when I was thinking about, like, Windows 7, for example, Windows 7 came out in 2009. Okay. And as far as hardware requirements, so, you needed a 1 gig of processor, you needed a gig of RAM, you needed, a decent, graphics card and so on. Debian 12 came out, summer of 2023, and had exactly the same requirements as Windows 7 did in 2009. So with regard to like older hardware, that's really where Linux should be shining. I kind of went around a little bit too much, but my thought process was, I think we're kind of overstating hardware being an issue.
Well, I think that you're right, but I would go so far as to say that it's software that's really the thing. That, I mean, people who, again, it comes back to the hobby thing. Like, people use their computers to do work. Most people do things like that. Maybe they're a designer or something like that, and they use Photoshop. That's not on Linux. Maybe they do AutoCAD work or 3D printing or something like that, and a lot of that stuff just doesn't exist on Linux, and it probably, and as sad as it is to say, it probably never will. And the canned response of every Linux YouTuber everywhere, including this one, is there are alternatives. And one of the things that Linux YouTubers should keep in mind, including this one, is that some people, even if there are alternatives to, say, Photoshop, don't see GIMP as an alternative. It's just not the same. Yes, if you put in some effort, you can probably do the vast majority of things you do in Photoshop and GIMP, but not everything. And that learning curve that you have to put in order to use the alternative is a lot of something that most people who, again, just want to use their computer just to do work don't want to have to put that effort in. Also, there are some things that just, for whatever unfathomable reason, don't exist. Like, if you are someone who works outside the home and you have to deal with a corporation of any kind. Drew, we've talked about this on the podcast because of the Outlook thing. It's not that Outlook is fantastic. It's fine. But the thing is that Outlook provides Exchange support. And on Linux, you can't get it. Right now, we've heard rumors that Thunderbird's going to do it. But we've heard that for the last 10 years, right? And I think that, yeah, we talk about Photoshop and stuff and AutoCAD stuff not being available. Those are very niche things for a certain community, and that's the reason why those communities will never come to Linux. But Exchange is something that a vast number of people use across a wide range of industries, and the fact that Linux can't easily give you that access to it without basically just using the web browser, then that's a big roadblock. So I do think the software is the big thing. Steve, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to first, above all, apologize for saying that people don't want to learn or any of that. I do acknowledge the existence of people who don't want to learn, and they prefer things to be very simple, and I have no problem with that. It's very normal. And yes, I want to also add that, yeah, software and drivers are the things that hold us back from adopting Linux, but that doesn't mean that Linux cannot be adopted. And Windows doesn't necessarily have it better in all aspects. Windows also has its own issues and its own caveats. So if we want to bring anything from Windows to Linux, is everything, most of the things that up to Windows, let's say 7-ish, I would say, because 10 onwards, not so great, but not completely mimic Windows. Just there are some features in Windows that are good. There are a lot of features that are bad. In Linux, it's the opposite. A lot of features that are good, very few that are bad. So Linux adoption will grow, but in my opinion, it will always grow at a very slow pace while compatibility gets up there in so basically it starts becoming a little bit, so basically when hardware manufacturers start making their things work on Linux, or developers from Linux make hardware that only work on Windows work on Linux as well by reverse engineering the drivers. There's also the whole issue with Photoshop. Well, I shared a recent post from my Bytes website where I mentioned Affinity. There's a script now on GitHub that allows you to install Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, and Affinity Publisher by running a script. And those are pieces of software that you don't need to pirate because they're not subscription based. They're one-time payment, and for $69, nice. They're very cheap to get compared to what they offer. So there is an alternative to Photoshop, and if they keep seeing us reverse engineering their tools to work on Linux, at some point they're going to think, hey, more people are using it on Linux. Okay, why not create a version that is native to Linux? So that's going to help us cross the threshold where Photoshop doesn't exist on Linux, so I'm not going to be using Linux thing. So there's that.
Yeah, Drew, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped somebody. RBM, go ahead.
So I would like to say that I agree that software is probably a larger compatibility concern for most people, just in general terms, not only for just desktop users, but especially workstation users, because it's not that uncommon for you to need to use proprietary internal software that's written for Windows also for your job. And these, but I do think that also hardware compatibility concerns are not being overstated at all. I think both concerns are actually heavily understated for the reason that I mentioned in the chat. People are afraid of the compatibility problem so much that they're worried about what about a couple of years from now when I have to go back to Windows because when I get a new job, they require me to use Windows for stuff. Or when I get a new laptop, it doesn't support Linux for certain stuff, especially like fingerprint readers were a big one for a long time, right? Or biometric scanners in general. Elite people, they don't work very well on Linux for a long time. I think they're a lot better now, but I don't own one, so I looked into it. But yeah, it's often more about what about in a couple of years when something else, makes a change related to this where where like Linux won't work for me in that case anymore. It's not even a real scenario. It's hypothetical. But that's where a lot of this comes from. It's not about like today my hardware or software isn't supported. It's about what about later when Linux still hasn't taken off and become properly mainstream, and I'm still using a tiny little niche bit, operating system, and something else changes around me, and I need my computer to work a certain way, and Linux doesn't support it. That's the big fear about the compatibility, and you can never fix that for people. You can never change that. There's nothing that can take that away. So,
Well, I mean, Windows has the same problem. It's just that it's more likely that it gets fixed on Windows, right? Like if something new comes along, Windows isn't going to have the support for it right away either. That's something that they're going to have to build in. It's just more likely that in Windows, because it's more popular, is going to get that support, right?
well, also they're like that stuff for like it comes out of the box supported on Windows though too. Like when the hardware gets released, for example, when a laptop comes out, it comes pre-installed with Windows, and it was pre-tested with Windows, the latest version of Windows, running everything. They're like that's what all the factory tests they did were to make sure that Windows ran right on it. They never test anything on Linux, and then Linux also doesn't receive driver support for at least a few months because they have to go sometimes reverse engineer it, and sometimes just it doesn't take much. It's just a USB device, and you just copy the code over and change a couple of parameters. But it doesn't come out of the box that way. It's something that you have to go work for. and we have to do it as a community instead. But Windows stuff, like, it comes pre-supported, so it's a lot less of a concern for people in those scenarios because it's built for Windows first.
Yeah. Drew, go ahead.
Less comment, more questions, actually. I mean, as far as Adobe is concerned, how much does it cost? And is at some point, is it I don't know, is it a cost issue as to, like, moving to a different or like an open source project like GIMP? Another question would be, like, I'm wondering if Exchange is becoming smaller and smaller in the marketplace because of things like, Google Workspace, for example,
Mhm.
And then the third question would be, like, have you guys noticed this influx of YouTube videos regarding my challenge to transition to Linux, my 30-day challenge and stuff like that? Seems very in vogue right now. I don't know. It seems like a lot of these tech YouTubers are looking to, are obviously they're trying to get more views, but and I'm wondering if this is just like a phase or something. When we hit the was it 4.5% of market share with Linux? I'm wondering if it's just like, hey, look, let's try something new here, and it's in vogue. I don't know. These are the three questions, guys.
Fraggle, go ahead. I think that means he doesn't want to go RBM.
Sorry. I forgot to unmute.
Okay.
No, I kind of got distracted for a moment there, but then I regained where I was going. So for like the subscription stuff and suites like Adobe and stuff like that you were just mentioning, Drew, with things like that, the crazy thing is like still within the education system, post-secondary, universe and everything like that. Like if you're taking graphic design, universities and colleges, they don't even actually pay for those subscriptions anymore, or they don't provide them to the students. They put it on the students to have to pay for those things themselves. And because they're quote unquote industry standard, that's what they learn. So they're forced into the Windows and Adobe type of economies and may never know that the open source stuff exists until they get to a point where they're so familiar with the tools that they use. It's such a learning curve to transition to something else that doesn't cost near as much or at all, unless you decide you want to invest in something open source like Krita or Blender, Inkscape, GIMP even. There's so many things out there to fill those gaps or transition to. And I know that Blender has made a massive amount of headway into becoming an industry standard in 3D design, 3D filming, everything like that. Like Blender is now partially, if not completely, the industry standard, as opposed to something like Maya, or anything like that. So, in some ways, people are essentially forced into using those things that they may not necessarily want to use or not even understand or know that there's an alternative available to do the exact same thing that they're being told is not available in any other way, or essentially being taught that unless you use this specific software on this specific system, you're not going to be able to work in this field. You're not going to be able to apply yourself in a meaningful way that creates fulfillment for yourself.
Mhm.
It's a weird thing. It's a really weird thing to me, for people to be forced in some ways into those things.
I think AutoCAD is a big example of that because people I don't know what it's called, but there's one big AutoCAD thing that you got to use, and that's Windows.
Revit.
Yeah, and it's just on Linux. RBM, go ahead.
Drew, I think I can address exactly your last question. about the Linux challenge videos that became in vogue recently. The timing, I think, may be very suspicious with the fallout from kind of AI slowing down a bit, at least in terms of content in general, and Microsoft recall. It was like 2 days after Microsoft recall dropped, and how bad it turned out to be. And then next thing you know, it seems like dozens of tech YouTubers started a Linux challenge, like right after that. And most of them were like 30 days or so. So they all dropped in roughly the same time period, just kind of depending on how long they took to edit them. So I think that's the main thing is it was because the conversation from like in the media, even from Microsoft recall was what if people hate this so much that they switch to Linux? Like that was a pretty common sort of headline, at least implied headline during the time too. So I think it mostly came from that.
I haven't watched many of those, but does anybody know if there's any of them that actually decided I'm going to stick on Linux? Any of them decide to stay? Does anybody know?
They're not big guys, not big tubers, and I don't remember the names of some of the smaller ones who did, but a couple did that I do remember seeing the videos for. But I mostly let YouTube play as white noise just for my tinnitus. So I don't remember who they were
That's
now.
okay. I'm that's about where I expected it to be. Like the vast majority would find that there are things that they just can't do, and so they had to move like to Windows, and then just a couple.
I do want to note before I mute my mic for this, based on what you're saying, is that there's going to be a huge bias that even you experience because they're all content creators who are already dependent on the Adobe ecosystem, for example, and use a lot of Windows stuff that just isn't supported on Linux, and they cannot switch. Like there just is no solution for them, given that DaVinci Resolve is also still a mess, you know. So that's it.
I don't want to talk about Resolve. Riggs, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just more on these YouTube videos. I don't know if it's this mythical year at a Linux desktop, but it's definitely YouTube's 2 months at a Linux desktop. There's been so many of them put out there. I think it might. I don't think it's all to do with Recall, but I think like maybe the first few of them might have been a reaction to Recall, and then the rest of them are like, "Oh, these Linux videos are getting big. Let's try it ourselves," and it's just kind of spread from there. But from the ones I've seen, the overall impression that I've had is that while most of them aren't sticking with it usually because of Adobe, the general consensus seems to be a lot more favourable than it was last time this happened. Like, there's not been any like this is completely unusable stuff from what I've seen. It's mostly been like this is in a pretty good spot, but I need like this particular software, so I'm jumping back. Like overall, it definitely seems more favourable than last time.
RBM.
I just wanted to totally agree with that. The sentiment has been very positive overall during this wave. People are really impressed, at least in terms of these tech YouTubers anyway. They're really impressed with like gaming on Linux in general. And they're really impressed with like things like Flatpak for just kind of general compatibility concerns with a variety of different apps and stuff. Like they're really impressed kind of in general. I haven't seen people do that much with any of the Atomic or Immutable distros though. So I don't know how much the people feel positively or negatively about those. But kind of your classic distros, your Mints and Manjaras kind of things, people have been really impressed with them. Even though, yeah, at the end of the day, they're like, I still need Adobe, so I'll be back next year, I guess, to try again. But it has been really positive. I do appreciate that.
I think that the savior of the Adobe solution, the Adobe problem, is that they're eventually going to make some of that stuff work in the browser. Not all of it, some of it's going to work in the browser. They've already announced started working on it, and eventually that'll become okay. Now, I don't think that it'll ever be as powerful as the regular desktop app, because I mean, if you think about like Office in the web, that's not quite the same as Office installed on your computer, but it gets some people by. So I think that that will change some of it, but it's not going to go the whole direction. Drew, go ahead.
I was just thinking back when Linus Tech did his Linux challenge like 3 years ago, and you're watching the dude, and he's like, and he's using pop and stuff like that, and you're like, don't, no, and then he just completely just borked his machine. Like, you know, it was one of those things where you just like, you wanted it so much to be like a positive experience, and it was an absolute train wreck of an experience for the guy. The one guy that I did see a challenge on that I was really hoping would be more positive was Raid Owl. And Raid Owl, you know, puts out awesome tech videos on, you know, home labbing and so on and so forth. Anyway, he's never done a Linux challenge before, and he did a 30-day, but he stopped at 22 days. And that was, I thought, oh man, that's a shame, because I really was hoping that someone like him could make that transition, and it just didn't work out that well.
Another one, that the only one really that I watched was Craft Computing, and he also had to go back to Windows, and that was more surprising for me because he's a Linux user on all of his servers. Like, he uses Linux on all of his servers that use a base operating system. So I thought that he'd be able to be more successful, but when it came down to just small sticking points, Adobe, and getting certain applications that just don't work, it's a software problem, right? Riggs, go ahead.
I still feel so bad for Pop OS over that bug in the Linus video. Like, that timing was terrible. Didn't he get it fixed like 2 days after as well? But like, even with how disastrous that Linus video was, that's what got my interest to like start researching this like further and look into it myself. And that was a complete train wreck. So now that we've got like loads of these videos coming out and people being generally favorable, but like, oh, I can't use it because of Adobe. The viewers don't need Adobe. So, like, genuinely, I think look at where the market share is in 6 months. I think we're going to see a big spike from these videos, because the content creators might not be able to stick with it, but most of their audience don't need Photoshop. And like, if I got inspired from something as disastrous as the Linus video, like, what effect are these videos having on people now that everyone's saying, hey, this is actually pretty good? Like, I think we're pretty close to a like decent growth in users.
Credit to you, by the way. Credit to you.
It was less. This is okay. You know what it was? Have you ever seen like if like somebody's playing a game on YouTube and they're so bad that you buy the game just to prove you're better? It was kind of like that. It's like, I stop him.
RBM, go ahead.
You know, I kind of wish that somebody would do another like tandem Linux challenge the way that Linus Tech Tips did, because I mean, Linus' experience with Linux was very user error prone. And it looked like he kind of just doesn't understand his way around a computer, more or less in general. Sometimes, like, he definitely knows his like proprietary software and stuff on Windows and all of his server software and everything, but it looked like he was struggling with like what I would consider to be basic, like just computing instead, like not being able to find the progress notification from KDE from Dolphin in the corner of the Dolphin window because his screen was too big. Like, that was a whole like 3-minute segment of complaining. And it broke back to that like 4 times in the video. They had flashbacks to it and stuff. It was like, why is this? But then Luke did his part of it, and it was really smooth sailing. And I don't think it's a difference between KDE and Cinnamon or Mint and Manjaro. I think Luke was just actually, I don't know, he still uses a computer on a day-to-day basis for more than just gaming on his personal time, I think. And Linus only like does work on his PC and then launches Steam in his spare time. And I think he just like kind of has maybe lost track of using a regular computer or something because that's what it looked like to me. Really simple stuff that he just personally messed up a lot of, especially like the zipping up a file and emailing it. He zipped up like a 4 GB video file or something to emails. Like, dude, of course you messed up. Of course it took 10 minutes to zip up. Of course it was slow. Like, you messed up. You messed up the same way that you would do on Windows too. Like, these are mistakes that you would make on Windows. These aren't Linux issues, except for blowing up his desktop with Steam somehow. That was crazy.
Yeah. Raggle, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of continue on with what RBM was saying, like videos like that are almost like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like a red herring kind of thing. It's like those are simple user errors that somebody is highly unlikely to experience. I mean, you may as well just record a video of, you know, your grandmother using Windows who's never touched a PC before in her life. You know, like they're just silly mistakes, right? That anybody with 2 brain cells to rub together could figure out. You know, it's similar to, and I'll apologize because she's sitting behind me, so she's going to hear me. But there was one time when Mrs. Fraggle's grandmother was going to send a screenshot from her phone, and she asked if it would be okay or if it would be too dark because the light was off in the room. You know, like, do I need to turn my light on for this screenshot to be bright enough for you to see it? Right? You know, like it's just, it's the lack of basic knowledge for usability. And it's like, you can do better than this. Like Linus Tech could have, like Linus himself definitely could have been done better than that. And I think some of the things that he did were almost intentional, just to be like, oh, Linux is bad, you know? And it's like, well, no, you're using it poorly. And there's a difference.
And some of the stuff was like it wasn't that it was completely different than Windows. Like, it was similar enough where he should have been able to. It'd be like, you know, walking down 2 different streets. One of them is well paved, one of them is a little rocky, right? It's still the same experience. It's just you have to have different skills and more nimbleness in order to do it. And it wasn't. It was like he couldn't translate the skills. It was in some ways, at least. But also, I think some of his mistakes, though, were easy things to make, like the whole apt thing on Manjaro. Like, he didn't know that apt it wasn't on Manjaro. He didn't know that there were differences. And I think that's something that a lot of new users experience if they find themselves in the terminal, right? Because the terminal is the separator between distros. A lot of the stuff is gesture. It's the same, like CD and movement stuff is still being the same. But when it comes to package management, that stuff is going to be different when you approach the terminal. It's why we tend to point new users towards the GUI, where those similarities exist no matter what the distros are. So why, I don't really, I mean, that was 2 years ago. So remembering why he decided that the terminal was the way to do something kind of baffled me. Like, because he could have installed Steam from whatever Manjaro uses for a GUI package manager. Although Manjaro does stupid shit with GUI package managers, like they use PAMAC, I think, at the time, maybe. And then the KDE one uses Octopi, which is like, I've been using Linux for 7 years. I have no clue how to use Octopi, or whatever the hell it's called. So confusing shit. Waffles, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
All right, cool. I think I got it now. Sorry, this is my first time talking on here.
Welcome.
I think the main problem people have is they tie Linux into their job, right? Where they come in using the entire Adobe suite. They come in using, they're like a content creator, or they're like a professional musician or something. And I'm like, okay, if you're gonna do these stupid Linux challenge things, you gotta like buy a separate computer and just use it for like your daily whatever you do. And use your work computer for work, because like if I were to work at some office, I'm not going to like force them to let me use Linux, you know, because I know that their software is only going to run on Windows.
Yeah. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that like Waffles said, if you really want to use Linux, I would recommend, like Waffle says exactly, have a separate PC, a laptop, or whatever. Put Linux on it, and for your work, have another laptop or another desktop. I know not everybody can afford two machines. We're not currently the world is in such a disarray that it's becoming harder and harder. But if you can do it that way, that'll be a good introduction to Linux. And only if your work allows and everything is compatible with Linux, only then move to Linux. But companies prefer forcing us to stick to one platform, which is Windows, because they have a lot of market share in it and what have you. I see it as something that's going to stifle the adoption of Linux, and that is not really nice to see. I see a lot of people starting new jobs with them being in Linux and happy on Linux and everything, and then they start their new job where they're forced to use Windows, and so they're gonna split. At this point, they're gonna split their lives into two: Windows, Linux. And sometimes that could be good, but most of the time that's bad, because you're not no longer concentrating on doing one thing and doing it good. You're splitting yourselves into two, your attention into two, and therefore there's no 100% anymore.
I mean, the solution for this didn't used to be go buy another computer, was dual booting, right? But dual booting has become a lot harder now on at least modern computers because of secure boot and UEFI and stuff like that. And because Grub is still not Windows friendly, right? Or we should say more that Windows is not Grub friendly. And every person I've ever talked to who has tried dual booting in the past has experienced some kind of bootloader issue. And that's just, unfortunately, a problem that is as old as Linux, and it's not something that's ever going to be changed. So dual booting is harder than it should be, because ideally that's the solution, right? If you're going to switch from Windows to Linux, the ideal solution is to not get rid of Windows completely and go 100% Linux cold turkey. It's to have both available to you, so when you need to, you find a stumbling block in Linux that you just can't overcome, you can go back to Windows, do the work that you need to do, and then go back to Linux, and then maybe continue to learn, and maybe eventually be able to adapt into a workflow that works as 100% Linux workflow. But you still have that Windows as a fallback. But because it's so hard to do and requires a lot of technical knowledge in order to maintain, and Windows tends to fuck over your bootloader. Also, good job, Matt, for being the first person to swear on your own damn thing. Because that's true. It's just something that's not suitable for the vast majority of people. Riggs, go ahead.
Yeah, we were doing so well on not demonetizing you until then.
It was my fault. Yeah, I know.
I think dual booting has way too many issues. Like, for me, I got lucky and it nuked Windows instead of Linux. But like, dual booting's not a realistic thing that we should recommend to people. I don't think it's just got too many issues. But people tend to look at switching to Linux as an all or nothing thing, but it's not. Like, if you have multiple machines, just use the right tool for the right job. I still have a Windows machine because some of my games don't play well with Linux. Most of the stuff I do is on Linux, but I still have that other machine for things that I need it for. And like, if somebody uses Linux, but their work computer's Windows, you wouldn't say that person's not a Linux user. It's just that there's one specific thing where they use the right tool for the right job. Like, there's still, like, people need to get out of this mindset of like, if I'm switching to Linux, I need to completely abandon everything. Like, no, if you've got two machines, just use what you need to use. Like, you don't have to completely ditch everything. Like just use the right tools for the right jobs.
Fraggle, go ahead.
I just had my hand up because I gotta go. So I just wanted to say goodbye to everyone, and it was a great discussion today. This one was a lot of fun, and for the most part, we stayed pretty well on topic too.
Yeah, I know.
Which is pretty great.
Very weird for
So-
us.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Fraggle. Have a good one.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
RBM, go ahead.
So I was curious about kind of like, first of all, what users are switching away from Windows about in the first place. Like we've talked a lot about why Linux may need to emulate Windows or imitate Windows or whatever a little more closely in order to like gain more user adoption or something, I think is the main goal. Excuse me. But I'm not actually sure why users would switch. I mean, I know why like some like conscientious objectors would switch, like we typically are, for problems with the operating system that we perceive. But most users don't even engage with the system enough to have most of the problems that we deal with in the first place. And then on top of that, I was thinking about the fact that Microsoft has such a captured audience on their operating system for a lot of reasons. Gates was ruthless in the 90s to make this happen, and it certainly worked because it still has, like 90+% desktop share or whatever based on practically, what he did in the 90s alone. But WSL is like a good enough substitute for Linux, and that most users can just use that when they need a little splash of Linux to do things for them, which I don't love that. I think it's a big problem regarding embrace, extend, extinguish that Microsoft seems to be very good at. But our substitute for that, or not substitute, but prior art, is kind of Wine, but it's not really as good as what WSL provides. Maybe we should try. Maybe there should be a project to offer a more comprehensive, like VM style, virtual machine style wrapper around Windows, like WSL is around Linux.
I think it's more. I'm sorry. I think it's. Sorry to interrupt. I think it's more that it's easier to get Linux stuff to work embedded on Windows than it is to get Windows stuff embedded on Linux, for multitude of technical reasons. But something like DistroBox, but for Windows, would be awesome. Sorry, I interrupted. You can go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering is like, what if we had a more comprehensive like wrapper around getting Windows apps to work the way that you can wrap Linux in WSL now. And the thing that makes that magical is that it's a virtual machine under the hood that they manage for you, instead of just being a container or something. Like they didn't do container technology with it. They did virtual machine on Hyper-V or whatever. And so they still don't like expose individual apps very well through that, but it gives you the full operating system to work with. But what if we had one kind of like that also provided like a proper like workspace, Windows workspace, to run just exactly your Adobe Creative Suite inside? You just had an icon on your desktop that launched your Adobe Suite in a Windows wrapper instead of, but not Wine, because Wine can't do it for some reason. But you can get really, really, really good results with just a thin Windows virtual machine that you launch Adobe within. You can get really far with that, especially if you do some like hardware pass-through stuff too. But
yeah, and that's where it's going to fall down, is because GPU pass-through is
that's
not.
the problem.
Yeah, that's the issue, right? If anyone, I mean, we probably have all tried it, is to put Windows inside of a VM, because we needed that. We needed to update that one USB device that only has Windows drivers, and so you need Windows for something. But everyone and their brother who has used Linux has tried to put Windows in a virtual machine, and it is an atrocious experience. You could give it all the RAM and all the hard drive space that you could possibly afford to give it, and it's still a slow, buggy experience in a VM. Now, I don't think that's a Linux problem. I think that's just Windows is a shit VM, something in a VM. It's just not good in a VM for whatever reason when it runs on Linux. But you're right in that I think that something like that would be truly great. I just think that the hardware pass-through stuff is
Yeah, I do think that the hardware pass-through is kind of the main obstacle there. But like, I have multiple experiences with very, very well running Windows virtual machines under Linux. Like I run a game stream server as a Windows VM that runs Sunshine. With of course, I did have to do the GPU pass through to give it. It couldn't be a game stream server without a GPU. But it is practically latency free, and it works so well that I can play games on it from across town on a mobile internet connection. So, like, you can get fine working VMs. It eventually degrades because I did so much other tinkering with it. But yeah, you can get really good ones out of it too. I don't know. I just don't know if we can tackle the GPU pass through thing that is kind of required.
Mm-hmm. All right, Riggs, go ahead.
Before we got on to WSL and virtual machines and stuff, IBM said something about like, why would people switch if they're the people who don't like, they don't really use what they're currently on. And that to me it goes back to what I said quite early on about like why I think to me most Linux users are going to be tinkerers, because the people who aren't going to like tinker with the system don't have an issue with Windows because they don't know what Windows is doing. Like I've got a mate of mine. I'm kind of like his like on-call tech support whenever he's got a problem. He doesn't know anywhere near enough about his operating system to have an opinion on it one way or the other. It's just, this is the thing that everyone uses, so I'm going to use it. And I think you need to have some kind of like interest in how the system works to want to switch in the first place, because otherwise you're just going to use what you're used to.
Sense. Waffles, go ahead.
Yeah, going back to VMs, there's a dirty secret that people don't know about, which is Adobe can run in Wine. It's just you need to run the installer in Windows. Their installer has a bunch of Windows system hooks that you can't run in Wine. But if you can get it installed and you can migrate that installation, you can actually get it running on Wine pretty easily.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So I think that we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We're approaching the 2-hour mark. This is a fantastic discussion, guys. I was honestly a little worried about it because we had just covered this on the podcast. I thought maybe we would rehash stuff, but a lot of stuff came up that we didn't cover on the podcast. So that was very good. So for those of you guys who watched live, thank you so much for watching live. We went well over 1,000 views this time just on a live stream, so that's very good. If you guys want to join us for a LUG, as we call it, someone emailed me some names for the LUG. I'm still out on coming up with a name, so LUG is it. Very creative. But anyways, if you want to join us, we do this twice a month. The first one, like this one, is in the early parts of the morning, at least for some people. It's 11:15 a.m. Eastern time. On the second Thursday of the month. If you can't join the early one, we do a late one, which is the fourth Thursday of the month. That's at 8:15 p.m. Eastern time. And the best way to check where those times are and your own, the topic and stuff, is to join the Discord server. Now, I know Discord is proprietary garbage, but we use Discord, and Matrix is just garbage. So it may not be proprietary garbage, but it's garbage. Anyways, you can join the Discord server. The link for that is in the video description of this video. That link will last for 7 days. After that, you can find the link elsewhere to join the server and find out all the information about the LUG. So you can join us. It's open to everybody. You don't have to talk. Some people have been here and just chilled out and listened while in the stream. You can do that, or you can, if you have a fairly decent microphone, it doesn't have to be super decent, just something that works with Linux will work fine. You can join in and talk to us as well. So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.